everyone, and welcome to another BookTrib live chat. I am your host, BookTrib Babe, and I am coming to you live from the BookTrib office. As you can see behind me, we have a lovely array of books. We love books over here, if you couldn't tell. We have such a treat for you today. We are going to be joined in just a few moments by the one and only Lee Woodruff. She is the former contributing editor of ABC's Good Morning America and is now working with CBS This Morning. And if that's not enough for you, she is also a New York Times best-selling author. And she is here to talk about her latest book, Those We Love Most. It is about family members whose lives are intertwined not only by blood and marriage, but by also a tragic accident. And you can win copies of this book. Just stick around until the very end. Lee will be announcing the 10 winners of Those We Love Most. And before I invite our guest of honor on camera, I would like to say very quickly to go sign up for BookTrib. It is easy, it is quick, and you will get all the updates on our live chats, our giveaways, and so much more. So without any further ado, I will see if Lee is there. Can we see her?
Yeah, I'll put her on.
Hi, Lee.
How are you?
Good, how are you? We're so happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me on. Do you feel better? You were a little under the weather, right? Let me see if I can get more light there. That's maybe a little better.
I actually can't.
How's that?
I'm going to have you go ahead and start answering some questions. We will put the first one on screen and take over.
I'm going to have to wear my glasses to read because I'm just getting, I'm getting too old, guys. Those We Love Most is your first work of fiction. How did you get the idea for the book, and did you draw from your own experiences? That's a great question, and I think for most writers, a lot of writers write from what they know because, when you're familiar with something or you've been somewhere or you've had an experience, it obviously begins to flow from the heart. So my first two books were nonfiction books. The very first book was about everything that my husband and I went through as a family when he was injured as a journalist in Iraq. And so it was the story of the injury and the recovery and sort of a family's general healing. And since that book came out, and the second book afterward, I think I'm more attuned to stories of survival, of resilience, of having to overcome things. So the novel, Those We Love Most, which I had always wanted to write a novel, came about because of a phone call that I received. So it was actually based on a real life story. There was a little boy, a town over from me. I live outside of New York City. And a girlfriend of mine called, and her son and my son were both 17 at the time. Her son's friend had been driving a car, clear blue day, no alcohol, and a little boy had been out in the street. I'm not sure exactly what the situation was with the boy, but he had been hit by a car. And the parents wanted to talk to me. They wanted to learn more about a brain injury, and they just wanted to understand what they were about to go through with their little son who was injured. And I am kind of that person for whomever wants information about, a head trauma or head injury. I'm always happy to talk to friends of friends. Parents never called. The little boy actually recovered and is apparently is, back to normal. But it got me thinking as I hung up from that phone call, think about all the people in that family who've just been affected by this tragedy. And I created the story, created the characters. That was just the leaping off point for me. But ultimately, the goal was really to show that people can survive and get through incredible things. So I think I'm just going to wait and see if other questions come up. But Avery, who asked the question, I love this question because a lot of times when the book first came out, and actually exactly this time of year last year, because the book came out in September. Ironically, it came out on September 11th, which is my wedding anniversary. I was sort of thinking about my elevator pitch and my book pitch, and this country had been going through economic hardship since 2008, and so the word from my publisher, Hyperion, was kind of people want happy stories, things where everything's tied up in a bow. And I am one of those readers who does not want to read a happy story. I don't want to read about the girl who gets the corner office and wears the, Christian Louboutin and Manola Blanc shoes and gets the prints and all that stuff because I don't believe life works that way. Now, having said that, I am actually a glass half full kind of gal, and I think life is fantastic, but life is life. And life has good times and bad times. And I think it's when you get handed the bad times and you go through the bad times that you get to feel how wonderful the great times are. So those kind of, airport romance kind of stories are not the books that I tend to like to gravitate toward. I like to read what I call those Oprah books where, there's the basic story arc and someone does go through a tough time. They do get tested and life isn't perfect. And I think that this story, more than anything, really illustrates that. But what I had to battle against was when people would say, well, what's your book about? And I would begin to sort of start out and say, well, there's this boy and he gets hit by a car. And people would say, I'm out. I cannot read a book where something bad happens to a child. And what I wanted to, impress upon people with this book is that that you never meet the little boy really. He's not part of the story. The incident happens right away, and it's really the device to get into the story to examine how a family responds to something, how people are tested, to look at a marriage and that middle place in marriage, which is another big theme of that book. What happens in the middle place in marriage? You really kind of have two choices, two ways you can go in marriage. You can stay or you can go. And so the boys, this is not a book about a child who dies, but the child who dies is really the way that you get into the family and you'll understand how people respond. Okay, Speedy Reader. I like that. I've been a Speedy Reader this summer. I've been trying to, before I answer your question, which is a great one, along the lines of Speedy Reader. This is the summer for me, and I know you guys are all with me here. Don't you have a stack or maybe a shelf of books that people have been giving you or wanted you to read or you've bought and you haven't gotten to yet? And you keep telling yourself, I got to get through that stack of books. And there's sort of like that feeling when your email gets really full and you know you need to answer people. This is the summer, Speedy Reader, where I am tackling my pile and I'm giving it the 50-page rule. So I'm looking at something, and if it doesn't grab me in 50 pages or it doesn't seem like my kind of book, I'm not going to let it sit there and guilt me. So this is that summer. So I'm being a Speedy Reader. And Speedy Reader's question is this: what suggestions would you give someone who is dealing with grief? That's a great question, and I get asked that a lot. And I think that grief is something that is so nonlinear. I mean, I still have moments 7 years past my husband's injury, and he's doing fantastic, and he's, back on the air at ABC and traveling and doing all kinds of things. But I still have moments, of course, where I feel the grief of that situation and how that one phone call changed all of our lives, and where I have to sort of stop myself from thinking, what would our lives be like if? And the if dot 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 part is a really horrible question to ask yourself because none of us are able to change or reverse the tape. And I think grief comes in waves, is really my point to you. So it's not a linear thing. It's not like today is a bad day and tomorrow's going to be a little less of a bad day and a little less of a bad day. What I found is there were payback days. So you'd have a really bad day, and the next day could feel really good. And then you'd have a day 2 weeks later where you would be sad again. So I think the best thing you can do is to forgive yourself for those bad days and to give into them. Because I think the worst thing you can do is fight them and believe that if you just keep trying to press them down, that they're going to go away. Because I don't think that's how grief works. So I think on the days when you feel like you just really want to cry or wail or scream, you need to cry or wail or scream. Because the best really medicine for grief, and it's the tritest thing I could possibly say to you, but it's so true, is that when time passes, it really does ultimately begin to mitigate some of that horrible feeling. And I remember in the very worst days when Bob was in a coma, and we didn't know how this was going to come out, and I didn't know if it would be me and 4 kids and as person in a vegetative state in a nursing home, or how it was going to go. I did the sort of 1 hour at a time, one day at a time thing. But I also realized later on that there are moments you can tell yourself it will never get worse than this. And if you can tell yourself that you've kind of come through the worst, then some of those days that feel really bad, you maybe can put them a little bit into perspective. And I also think that that grief is so different for each one of us. I know that men and women grieve differently. I know that different people grieve differently. We have different markers for what hurts and when it hurts and when something springs up. I went to a memorial service yesterday for a friend of mine's dad. He lived a long, full, beautiful life. He died maybe a year or so ago, but we are all in a community right now where we've grown up together in the summer and we're together. And I slipped into the back of the church late and listened to the music, heard the things they were saying about him, and it unlocked this torrent of tears for me yesterday. I sort of just needed to cry yesterday. I was thinking about my own dad when he passes. I was thinking about me when I pass. And I think the beauty of grief sometimes is it can come like a roto-rooter and unclog some of the things and feelings that we're having and help us move forward. But it's definitely, don't let anyone try to tell you that it's a progression, that each day it's going to feel a little bit better. I think it works in clumps and it'll feel good for a couple of weeks and then you'll hit a bumpy patch and it will feel, not so great. Um, so that's the grief part. And I have actually written a fair amount about grief. I don't think any of us get out of this life without our stuff and without feeling some of what that feels like to grieve. It is a natural process to lose something, which is also a theme of the book as well, those we love most. It's just about losing things. Okay, Jacqueline Haggerty. Are the Corrigan family's values and strengths similar to that of your own family? Did you use them as inspiration? That's a great question. How much of this, in fact, when I gave the original first draft to my sister, she said, "Are people going to think this is our family? Are people going to think, Dad's having an affair and, one of us is having an affair?" And I said, not being a writer, you don't understand that you take the kernel and nugget of things you see around you, and then you get to have so much fun with your characters. You get to layer on all of these like good things, bad things, fun things. So the similarities and kind of like, family that stayed together, my family and the Corrigan family. And the Corrigans, by the way, were named for my writer friend Kelly Corrigan. If any of you have ever read The Middle Place or Lift, Kelly's a good friend, and we kind of got into the whole book thing at the same time. And I just was looking for that Irish family that I could roll some of my observations about living in sort of middle class life, growing up in Albany, New York, and just sort of how families work. My family was not a country club family as the Corrigans are. I think the Corrigans have a decent bit of money, which was not necessarily how I grew up. But as I got older and sort of navigated through college and beyond, so see, this is real life. People call you on your phone. Um, and I don't know how to shut the phone off. So just hang on.
Call from out of area.
Um, hang on one sec, guys. We're not picking
Call
up. We're gonna let the
from
machine
out
get
of
it.
area.
And I hate that woman's talking voice too. Um, so the Corgans are loosely based on just what I know in terms of an intact family, but the things that happen to the Corgans are not, and that was really fun to kind of just take them. They're raw clay when you create characters. They're totally raw clay, and you can do with them what you like. I am getting a question about where I am right now. Where it looks like I'm in a cabin, and I sort of am. I'm in this and I'm not going to walk you around and show you, but I'm up in the Adirondack Mountains. I grew up in Albany, New York, which is sort of at the, in the central eastern part of New York State. And when I was a kid, we would come up here to this little YMCA camp and spend sort of the summers, and my dad would commute back and forth. So I'm actually in my grandmother's house, which was built in 1894. And about 10 years ago, Bob and I had the good fortune to be able to buy it and begin to renovate it because it was in pretty bad shape. So this is a new room that I'm in now. Let me see if I can just kind of turn things around. So I've got my little birchy bark stuff, my little birch bark light back there. I've got my Kleenex box because Lord knows there's a lot of pollen this summer, and a whole bunch of stuff. So this is my desk right here where I'm sitting. And this is where I write. I'm getting a lot of writing done this summer. I'm working on another novel, and it's a departure from the loss and examining resilience and strength and all that stuff. But it's definitely family interconnected. It's actually a book where marriage and relationships end up being the champion a little bit. So I've been getting a lot of writing done until my husband came up here. And that slows the whole mojo down. So This is my special writing place. You are in my special writing room right now. And a lot of times when I need to finish a manuscript or work on another book or really crank, I come up here, ditch the kids, leave them in New York, and come up here and really write because I can sequester. It's my happy place. What do I like to read? Connie wants to know what I like to read. I read a lot of different stuff. I'm actually reading Ethan Frome and Summer right now, Edith Wharton's books, because a girlfriend said, you need to read Summer. It's got beautiful, beautiful language. At the same time, I'm reading a book called A Bittersweet Season, which is about taking care of your elderly parents, because I'm in that sort of sandwich generation place in life. I have two ARCs on my desk. An ARC is called an advanced reader copy. So those are books that are not out yet. And one is called Plenty of Time When We Get Home from a female soldier, Kayla Williams, who wrote another book called Love My Rifle More Than You, which was a worldwide, published worldwide. And this is really a wonderful account of post-traumatic stress and her relationship in marrying a guy who'd been injured and what happened. And this book is called A Memoir of Life After Amnesia. It's called Think Again, and it's a girl who literally was hit by a ceiling fan. So I get sent a lot of ARC copybooks for people who have sort of walked in that place in life, either military or wounded or injured or battling something. And I really try to blurb. I really feel strongly about blurbing books for other people. My favorite book that I read this summer, and it was a surprise to me, was Liz Gilbert's book, The Signature of All Things. I thought that was a beautiful book, and it's about plants and Darwinism and a strong female character. She's done so much research for this book. I really super love this book. So I have two sisters up here. We get as many books as we can all summer, and we just keep passing them around. I've got The Dressmaker, that book from the Titanic. I've got Telegraph Avenue, Michael Chabon, which I haven't started yet. And I would have to go up to my room and try to remember all of the other books that I've cycled through. What was one? Oh, one of the books that I absolutely loved, and I just finished and passed it on to my sister, is called To Be Sung Underwater. And I'm trying to remember the author's last name. His first name is Tom, and he was a Stegner fellow. Wallace Stegner is my absolute favorite author of all time. If you haven't read Crossing to Safety, and I once wrote a blog on my website, which is just leewoodruff.com, about rereading my favorite book, which is Crossing to Safety. I read it when I was a newlywed and then read it 20 years later at my 20th anniversary and loved it even more. So I loved To Be Sung Underwater. Um, and Pommy Pom, my friend Pommy Pom is also saying add Ocean at the End of the Lane to books. It is on my list. I keep seeing it. It keeps cropping up on the New York Times bestseller list. Thank you, Tom McNeil. Thank you, Hula Monkey. See, I've got my people right here to tell me who the authors are. But I'm dying to read Ocean at the End of the Lane. I want to know. It sounds like that was a popular hit with folks that follow me on Twitter as well. I've been hearing about that one. Okay, Brenda Brown Elliott, this is my first experience with the program. Isn't this kind of cool? I'm about to self-publish my Christian fiction novel. Can you talk about your first experience doing a book? Wow, how exciting for you. And just a quick note about that, because I get asked a lot about publishing and self-publishing. There is no better time to be doing this. And as much as I think people worry that what's happening to reading and are people reading, yes, they are. I don't think people's reading habits have changed so much other than how we read. And the fact that we now have Kindles and ebooks and so forth makes self-publishing so much easier. So congratulations to you. Have fun with it. And I guess my basic advice to everyone out there self-publishing is that the other beautiful thing about this is, as much as people lament traditional media going away in terms of covering books, so we've lost a lot of newspapers that used to cover books or local television stations that would have authors on. So the traditional book tour that an author went on, my first book, for example, 7 years ago, was 100% different than the launch of Those We Love Most in the fall. Because social media and your ability to be democratic, to really reach out and meet your audience in sort of a horizontal format where you're able to connect with Christian readers, for example, with your Christian fiction, is so much greater now that you have the internet and all of these wonderful social media tools, like a show like this, where you can connect with people and talk about your book. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a writer, and I applaud you for that. Start laying the groundwork before the book comes out is what I often tell writers. Start creating a base on Twitter. work your Facebook page. There are different kinds of Facebook pages. There's a fan Facebook page, and then there's the basic one that those of you on Facebook have to talk to all your friends. So begin to, at least 6 months out, start trying to talk to people. Send out copies of your books to, places like BookTrib, for example. They're reading things before they come out, and they've got a grasp. And all of those are really valuable tools to getting your word out. Andrew asks, what's the difference between writing for TV and writing a book? About, 900 pages. Do you prefer one over the other? That's a great question. Writing for TV, I'm usually writing segment pieces that are 2 minutes long. It's tight. You have to think about the organization of telling the story in such a completely different way than a novel where you have, 300 pages or 350 pages. Somebody really wants me, don't they? And you know what I'm going to do? Watch this. This is my sister, and I'm going to tell Meg, I'm going to have to call you back. I'm doing a live chat right now. Okay? Bye. How about that, right? Real life in truth sometimes. I have to think about where I was. Oh, novel. So novel, obviously, you can paint so much more in terms of your words. And I love, love, love the paintbrush of words. The challenge and the fun thing about TV, and actually the reason that my husband got into TV, frankly, was that you marry the words to the pictures. So in a book where you allow the reader to use their imagination with your words to figure out what does she look like. Obviously, in television, you know exactly what that person looks like. And so your wording and your writing is so much tighter, and it has to be written to that. I love being able to do both, to be honest. It's a fun thing to be on CBS. And for those of you who have not tuned into CBS This Morning yet, those of you still watching Good Morning America and the Today Show, check out CBS. And I'm saying it because they've taken a completely different tact than sort of the Kardashian nipple-piercing reality show approach of the other two. And they're going just sort of straight news, but I love it. It makes me feel really smart. I know what's going on in the world, and if you do nothing else, you can tune into the top 2 minutes, and there's something called the eye opener where you get to know all of the headlines for the day in a really fun video format, like a big YouTube video. So you can go to the water cooler at work and sound informed. It looks like there's only 25 minutes left to ask your questions, so come on, guys, throw anything at me. Here we go. Savvy Bookworm. Hi, Savvy Bookworm. What is your writing schedule like? You're such an active journalist and mother. How do you find time to write books or stories? Oh, Savvy Bookworm, I'm not finding enough time. I wish that I could be one of those people that has, a set time where they write for 3 hours every day, and I can't. I still have 13-year-old twins at home. My older guys are in college. One just graduated, so that makes life a little bit easier. But I'm going to tie that answer into another question which just came up, which is, what's been your involvement in remind.org? And I'll talk about the second part of that question in a second, but that's the reason I think sometimes that I don't have as much time as I'd like to write is I am involved in other things. So there's CBS This Morning as a journalist, and then very, very, very passionate about our veterans and our foundation, the Bob Woodruff Foundation, is dedicated to helping those who have come back with the hidden injuries of war. So I spend a lot of time, probably 25 hours a week, I would say, working on our foundation. There will be a day that comes that I will be able to write in a regular schedule, but I'm not there yet. So I always say when people ask the question, I write between the margins of my life, which is kind of a stupid and crazy answer, but it's really true. I'll slip in if I have an hour somewhere, or if I'm on a plane. I do a lot of traveling and speaking to various groups, and so I can write well in a hotel room, believe it or not, or on an airplane, because yeah, those of you who are parents probably understand. There aren't dishes blinking at me. There aren't the other distractions, and I write really well up here in the mountains. This is where I get a lot of my great reading done. As far as the second question, what's the favorite method you've observed others providing support to injured military members and their families? People always ask, how can we help our injured service members? And my answer is look locally. Look in those places and try to find these families. They're just the most wonderful. If you don't know someone who's served their country, either in previous wars or in these wars as well, it is such an honor to have met so many of these families, and they exist in your town, whether it's somebody who's in the Guard, National Guard or Reserve, or if you live near a base, or you've had somebody whose son served or their grandson served. So as locally as you can extend your support, whether it's as simple as bringing a casserole over to somebody, or if there's somebody who's, has a disability and maybe is at home more, maybe you can spell that mom or that wife or that husband to just go out and get something to do. And you can often find out who some of these families are, either through churches or community organizations, and just figure out ways to plug yourself in. Lee, Jessa says, Lee, you're a journalist and have written other nonfiction books. How did you like writing fiction? More to come or going back to nonfiction? Great question. I love writing fiction. I thought it was what I would always do. Um, Surprise to me that my first book was a nonfiction book about my life. Who would have, I always thought, like, who would ever want to hear about my life? But it ended up being a #1 bestseller and stayed there for a couple of weeks, which was a big surprise to Bob and I. But I think in so many ways, our story is everybody's story who's hit a difficult patch. I do mostly nonfiction writing on my blog. So I write sort of some funny, some poignant stories about my life. And writing nonfiction is so much easier to me because you can, tweak at the margins. You can give yourself better boobs or, fewer wrinkles, or maybe a little higher IQ. But in the end, when you write nonfiction, you really sort of have to stick to the facts. So I found I could write something, go make a waffle for a kid, and come back to nonfiction because you know the story. The challenge in fiction, and I think the reason why it's so much fun for me, is you're making it up. You are making it up from nowhere. So the story has to hang together. The dialogue has to feel authentic. That was a challenge in Those We Love Most. I needed to make sure those characters were talking the way people would really talk. And that was really pretty fun. But it also makes it, I think, more of a challenge. Catherine Ivan, very inspiring. Thank you for entertaining my question. Catherine, thank you for asking the question. I feel like there is no right answer to being a writer. I feel like being a writer has this big connotation with these italics around it and stuff. We're all writers, and furthermore, we all have a story. And I encourage everybody to write their story, whether they're going through a good time or a hard time or what have you. I think writing is one of those powerful tools that we can also use to heal ourselves. And I think in my really lowest moments, I have always turned to writing as a catharsis. And a lot of the first book, in an instant, was pulled, not a lot of it, but let's say maybe a third of it, was pulled from entries that I had written going through hard times. And even Bob as well, some of it pulled from his journalistic experiences when he was first embedded in Iraq and some of the other earlier stories that he had tackled as a journalist. Justice says, what advice do you give novice writers who get frustrated with all the rewriting novels require? Oh, welcome to the club, girlfriend. I just finished a manuscript for a first book, for this next book, and I'm staring at it right now. Here it is. Here's what it looks like. It's got, single spaced whatever. My sweet husband put it in a book for me, but it's already got a million things that I need to change and notes, and it takes place in the Southwest, so I, need to research what kind of bird sits on a cactus. And I think the best advice that I can give you when you're dealing with the rewriting, and of course, this is the second go round on this novel that I'm working on this summer. And I've sent it out to my agent. I've sent it out to what I call a couple of first readers. And those are people who I really trust, who love books. One of them is my sister, actually, who just called. And they will go through it very carefully and give me some really thoughtful responses. But I'm not going to touch that notebook until I've heard back from those people, because I could just keep massaging and massaging and massaging until it turns to jelly in my hands, and I need to step back from it. So my advice to anybody who's in the editing process, whether you're just writing a blog or if you're writing an essay or you're writing a novel, is put it away for a little bit and step back. And if you need to, and you don't want to too much lose your train of thought, write down some of the overarching issues and questions that you have for yourself. Stick those in with the book, just in case you need to be reminded of what they are. You probably won't be if you've written it. And then go back and look at it after whatever respectable period of time you feel like you've renourished yourself. Because writing a book is like, delivering a baby and then cooking up the placenta and eating it. Not that I've done that, but I think people do. And you just need to totally remove yourself from the process. You need to remove yourself from the story. You need to go take a lot of hikes, which reminds me, this is how I talk and do speeches and lectures. I don't use notes. I just kind of wheel around. And so I want to get back to the person who asked me about grief. Because one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given was, when you're having a really hard day and you're sad, go to the land, go outside, go look at the sky. When you're feeling sad and closed in and like your world is a very small place, Go take a walk in the woods. I have found that to be one of the greatest healers, of just opening the world up and reminding yourself it's a big old world out there, and there are lots of us out here, and we're out here for all the right reasons to help you heal, to listen, to show you that we hurt too. I think sometimes that reminder is wonderful. Speedy Reader asks, if you had to drop all the things you're currently doing career-wise, what is another job you would like to try out? I can tell you without hesitation, my next job will be a waitress, because it was actually my very first job, and I loved it. And here's why. You walk up to the table, you take the order, you find out a few facts about them, you talk, you deliver the food, and then they're gone. You get a tip, you clean the dishes, you bring them back in, somebody else usually washes them, and you're done. There are no emails. There's no lingering, oh my gosh, I've got to revise that, or I need to make that character more sympathetic. All right, I'm being a little bit facetious. I feel like I'm one of those lucky people that's doing exactly what she wanted to do. It took me a circuitous route to get here, and I worked in the public relations field for a long time, working for various clients within a public relations agency, and then on my own when I was raising young kids and moving a lot with Bob's journalism career. I love what I do. I have to say, I feel lucky that I can do these different pieces of things, but there are days it makes me crazy, guys, because my life is sliced into a bunch of different pies. So um, there are times I envy people who are just writing, for example, and they've got those 3 hours or 4 hours they can devote every single day. But I feel like if I get to live long enough, I'll be able to do it that way. Savvy Bookworm, do my children read my books? And if so, what do they think of them? I love this question. And up until this summer, I could honestly say my kids hadn't read any of my books. And then for some reason, my son wanted to read my second book, Perfectly Imperfect, actually last winter, because his girlfriend told him it was really funny and that I was really funny. So he read that book and claims to have liked it. And my daughter read Those We Love Most over the Christmas break and really liked it. And then now she's reading In an Instant, which is a little weird because it's about stuff that was going on when she was there, and it's not a lot about my kids. That's another whole conversation we can have at some point in time. Where is the line when you're writing about your family, and how much information do you trade on that's about their lives? And I think I kind of have figured out where the line is so that everybody's happy and no one's screaming at me. But my kids, I think it'll be interesting to ask them what they honestly think about my book. She hasn't finished In an Instant, and they're not super huge on praise. I am their mom. I am queer and weird and nerdy and all of those things that, and they're good things that I'm sure they feel about me too. But they're not. I don't think they're going to ladle on a lot of praise. Let's just put it that way. I'm waiting to hear though. I'll need to ask her. Do you? Oh, if I had to pick a favorite book, what would it be? I'm jumping questions here, and Jacqueline, I'll get back to you. Definitely Crossing to Safety, Wallace Stegner's book. As somebody said about Crossing to Safety, which is a very simple story about two couples who are friends and then the journey that life takes them on. It has no blue aliens, no swear words, no sex, and yet the way Wallace Stegner constructs a sentence and the message sort of about life and going the long haul in life is a beautiful, beautiful message. So I would encourage anyone to read one of Stegner's books. Your latest book sparks the question, why do we hurt the ones we love? What is your reasoning or answer to this question? Great question. Why do we hurt the ones we love? I think that we're human. I don't think we always mean to hurt the ones we love, but I think one of the great questions that I wanted to look at in the book, Those We Love Most as well, is the question of forgiveness. When we do hurt the ones we love, how are we able to forgive? And what's the power of forgiveness? And what's the harm done when you can't forgive? When you hold a grudge or you're unable to move on? I think one of the interesting things in life is I was talking about this with some girlfriends. I think about being a young woman and sitting there with my girlfriends and talking about the what ifs. And someday if I get married and if he cheats on me, he's out, he's gone. And I think over time you begin to watch the line move about what is and what isn't acceptable. Not that adultery is ever acceptable, but life becomes much more gray as we get older. And so here is in the example of the book, Those We Love Most, here is a family with a mother, and she's raised, three children with this man, and their lives are intertwined, and they're older. These are the parent figures in my book. Do you really throw the baby out with the bathwater? Do you stand on ceremony? Do you try to work things out? That answer is different for every person and for every different marriage. There is no one size fits all there. But I wanted to examine that sort of gray area part in life, because I think when my girlfriends and I get together now and we ask ourselves that question, what would we do if our husband cheated on us? The answers are very different. The answers are way more nuanced because you've got kids involved and you've got, years logged, and you've got fear. What happens? Do I want to, be single? And all these questions. And I loved sort of poking around at that in Those We Love Most. I loved examining that part of it. Avery asks, as a journalist, what's that one question that you hate having to ask when you're interviewing someone? Or maybe a question you hate getting asked? Wow. Oh, I hate asking somebody. It's a great question. Each of my stories sometimes is so different from the other. Um, I guess I try to stay away from those questions that are so rote, like how did you heal, or some of those nuanced kind of, general questions. I always try as a journalist to get to the heart of a question that's a little bit different or come at it from a different angle, if at all possible. Um, and what do I hate getting asked? I'll tell you exactly what I hate getting asked. Um, how were you so strong? Or, you're such an inspiration. Those are more comments. But when I hear those two things, I think I wasn't at all strong. I'm no different than anyone else. And then the other thing I sort of think sometimes too is, what choice do you have? When you're handed a bag of excrement in the middle of your life and you're a parent or you're responsible for other people or you're a caregiver, you really have two choices, as a wise woman once said to me. You can get bitter or you can get better. And I don't know anybody out there who wants to be a bitter, old, pruny-faced lady. So I think the goal when life hands you the bad thing is to figure out how you can try to turn it and get back up on top. And as someone said to me once, to not just play the hand that you're dealt, but to simply try to get your hands on the whole deck. And that really is the key to life for me. I am no one's inspiration. I have plenty bad days. And, I'm not always Polly Sunshine. So, when people say that to me, I always feel I am not. It's the old, like, uh, I am not worthy thing. Wayne's World. That's what I was trying to think of. Did you ever think while writing this book that the idea of dealing with a child's death may be too sad for some readers? I absolutely did. I absolutely did. In fact, I knew when I finished the book that there would be people who, as I said to you, whose first response would be, I can't read a book about a kid who dies. And my answer is similar to the one I gave it in the beginning of the chat, which is really, the book is not really about a child's death. It is the thing that happens, because oftentimes in life there's something that happens that cracks us all open. So all of the fault lines and the flaws that we all have in our relationships, and there are two generations in a family here in that relationship, those fault lines get cracked open when a bad thing happens. And so James, the little boy who you never really meet or form a bond with as a reader, his sudden instantaneous death is the thing that cracks everyone else open to examine some of those themes that I'm so fascinated with. The middle place in life, as we've talked about, forgiveness, the ability to forgive. What happens if you cause something to happen to somebody else? How do you move forward with your life? The 17-year-old boy, Alex, who was driving the car, I had some really serious decisions to make about him. Did he go forward and take the stage of his life because he had, in fact, inadvertently taken someone else's life? So what would Alex do? Would he belly up to the bar and drink the rest of his life away? Or would he decide to go out and make his life count in two ways? So yeah, I did have to think about that. On the other hand, these are things that are real things. These are real life situations. These are the fill in the blanks. So maybe it's not a child's death, but maybe it's a friend's cancer. Maybe it's a husband's infidelity. I mean, all of the little things that go through our lives, none of us will be Teflon, and none of us will escape them. And I love plumbing that. I think the books that I want to write, and certainly the books that I want to read, as I said, are not the ones where everything's tied up in the bow. I want to be thinking about that book 2 days later. And that was the kind of book that I wanted to write. Mary McCoy, this is my friend Mary McCoy in LA. I love Mary. Do you have a bucket list? And if you do, what are the top 3 items on it? Well, Mary McCoy, if this is my Mary McCoy, and even if it's not, My top 3 bucket list items. Wow, that's great. I really want to travel around the world or to various parts of the world with a backpack again. I had the luck and the pleasure of doing it with my husband the year after we were married, way pre-kid, and I really, really want to do it again. What would the other 2 things on my bucket list be? I would love to really cook a fantastic meal. I'd like to take a cooking course and be a really, really good chef. Because I love food. I'm not a true foodie, but I'd like to be better at a foodie, and that as a foodie. And then I think the third part of that kind of connected is someday I would like to have a giant garden and grow all of my own things. Because when I'm happiest, moving family and husband and all that stuff out of it, but my other happy places are writing and being out in a garden, dealing with flowers and tending flowers and growing vegetables and things. Those things make me really happy. I'm going to think more about that bucket list question, though. That's a really great question because I've been fortunate enough to have done so many great things in my life, and I feel just being a writer is one of the hugest items that would have been on my bucket list was to write a book, and I feel such a great sense of accomplishment at having been able to do that. That feels great. Desmond asked, if you answered already, I apologize. Please don't ever apologize to me, Desmond. Were you able to make a smooth transition from nonfiction to fiction, or is there some particular pitfall unique to fiction writing or to nonfiction writing for that matter? Great question. I didn't really answer that in that way. I hope the transition was smooth. I mean, I'd written a lot of short stories and been to writer workshops where I'd plunked around with fiction before, and I probably, like so many of you who are writers or want to write more, I've kept files for years of ideas, and I think a writer is a great observer. So something will happen, someone will have a stain on their shirt, or someone will say something, or someone will tell me a story, and I will think about it, and if I remember it, go back and write it down. So I think I've been collecting stories and watching people for a very long time. I think the pitfall to me, I'll tell you 2 pitfalls, one for fiction, one for nonfiction. The pitfall to me in fiction writing is dialogue. And I did talk about that earlier, but I don't think you can talk about dialogue enough because I think you have to say your dialogue out loud. I think you have to read it out loud when you write it. People do not speak like they write. Those are 2 completely different forms of communication. And so your dialogue probably in a book has a lot of contractions in it. People don't say, I cannot stand this. They say, I can't stand this. So make sure your dialogue isn't the written word and make sure it's genuine and authentic and read it out loud as you're writing it or after you've written it. Nonfiction, especially when people are doing memoirs, to me, I think that the biggest thing that I see that people fall into a pattern of doing is telling their life story in a completely linear fashion. So here I was walking along the street, then the car hit me. Now here I am in the hospital for 9 weeks, and I'm going to go through every IV and every drug that I was on. And I think that's where I get lost in a lot of the memoirs that I get sent and a lot of the advanced reader copies of sort of the linear life. Jump around, have some fun, shrink time, expand time, move us through your life in different ways. Start in the middle, try some things that will captivate us. And that's what I challenge people writing nonfiction to do. I think it's a really, really, really fun way to go about doing it. We're out of time. Holy moly, Batman! How did that happen? This is what happens when I'm having a fun time. I'm so flattered that there were so many of you asking great questions, and I want to thank you for such a great chat. And I'm going to announce the official winners of those we love most. So, guys, here we go. Connie Crystal, Pommy Pom, who I love on Twitter, Brenda Brown Elliott, Catherine Ivan, Joanne Smith Ainsworth, Karen Terry, Rhonda Laney, Desmond, and Mary McCoy. Yo, you guys just won a book. Now do me a favor, and after you've read the book, please come to my website, say hi, leewoodruff.com, tell me what you thought of it, ask me your questions, and if you're one of our lucky winners, please email booktrib@booktrib.com with your mailing address so that you can claim your prize and that we can get the books off to you. And my publisher, Hyperion, is so happy to be giving them away, and I'm so psyched that you guys won and you were able to join me today at a afternoon in August. So you're the best, and I promise I'll get working on this next book so that I can come back on soon and talk about it And thanks to BookTrib, we love our book readers. We love our book sites. We love places that make us smarter and tell us what to read. And so keep tuning in. Thanks so much.